My name is Matt Garcia. I'm the portfolio manager for anatomy and physiology at McGraw-Hill. So I work a lot on the development side. I was heavily involved in virtual labs and obviously many of our other products in the anatomy and physiology portfolio. To start, so today we're going to be talking about virtual labs, and I want to show you just what is virtual labs. So Connect Virtual Labs, it's going to be an assignment type in Connect. So you've adopted Connect. Here's one assignment type that you can assign to students. And it's a fully online lab solution that you can either use for a lab replacement, lab preparation, supplement. You can even think about the virtual lab that I'm showing today. Could you use it in the classroom setting? Could you, the instructor, be showing this to students, walking through the virtual lab simulation, giving them an understanding of either what they'll be doing, or if they're not doing a particular lab, at least showing them what the experiment is. So think of this as many different ways you could use our virtual labs that I'm going to show today. Even for those of you that are completely online this semester, if you're doing synchronous or asynchronous lecture sections, you could even use this as a lecture engagement tool, showing it on the screen to students. So maybe not even something that you have to assign to them. But I'll go through some of those different scenarios. But before we begin, this is the link that Valerie just put into the chat. And this lists all the different labs that we have available. Virtual Labs was built for biology, anatomy and physiology, microbiology, and we have it available in a few other courses. So you'll see some labs on here that if you're only teaching A&P, you may never use, and that's okay. Students only see these labs if you've assigned them to them. So a student would never see gram staining in A&P unless you would actually assign that to them in an A&P course. But what you can do is you can download this flyer so you're well aware of what we do offer. And again, ask any questions either in the chat or you should be able to take yourself off of mute during our session at any time. So like I mentioned, Virtual Labs is an assignment type in Connect. So what I've done is I've logged into one of my Connect courses, the Saladin Anatomy and Physiology book. And this will be the same regardless of what book you're using. It will be the same even if you're using a non-majors biology or a microbiology or any book that offers virtual labs. When we go into our Connect course, under Add Assignment, that is where we will see virtual labs to assign to students. So that list that I just showed in that website, this is how you can get to all of those labs. When we launch in here, it's going to give an entire list of labs that now you can start to choose from based on what you want to assign. So for example, if you're getting ready to cover cardiovascular blood, here's different blood type labs. If you're getting ready to cover even the beginning of the semester, cells and chemistry, there's some diffusion and different type of introductory type of labs. Now I'm going to point out over here, you can search by keyword and filter. So for example, if you're teaching A&P1 and you want to find any virtual labs that would go to the muscular system, we could come down here to, which I think it's under skeletal muscle. So here's the different labs that would be based on virtual labs for skeletal muscle system. You can preview these labs at any time. So if you're not sure if you really want to assign these to students, what you can do is you can go preview the lab here to get an idea of would you want to assign this to students. And again, think back to different ways you could really use these labs. If you wanted to show this lab to your students during a lecture, like this would be the exact way of how you could bring this up and do this lab yourself. Now, when a student goes into a virtual lab for the first time, what they're going to be presented with is an introduction. here's key concepts and an overview, and then sometimes there's images, or sometimes there's videos that will show students a process they'll be going through for this lab. After students would review that material, that's where they can go on, and it now brings us to our phase 2. We see our directions here on the right side, different options down here. Now I'm in instructor mode. So what we could do in instructor mode is we can actually skip all these phases. So let's see, if I used Control-Shift-K, I can actually skip through and go all the way to the end. So again, if it's a way that you just want to see what's included in this lab, that's how you can skip. Students would never see this skip information here in preview mode. This only shows up when I preview a lab as an instructor. Now, showing students or students working on a lab, they're always going to see, again, their directions here on the right side, different notes here at the bottom. They can show labels if they're not sure what they're supposed to be picking up. At different points, they'll be recording their lab data. If a student gets lost, they can reset either the entire lab simulation or just the phase that they're in. So it gives a lot of control over making sure that the students know what they're supposed to be doing. Now I'll just go through quick here. We'll pick up our clamp. We'll attach the frog leg. We'll attach the electrodes to stand. Stand. And I'm just going to make sure I've got this right. So if I'm a student, I need to attach it to the stand. And I think we had some questions come in. Is that correct, Valerie?
Yes. So one question was, are these labs based on the PhILS labs? And
good question.
Go ahead.
So for anyone that had previously used LearnSmart labs, the virtual labs is a rebuild of our LearnSmart labs. So LearnSmart labs is an old lab simulation product that we had that was Flash-based, that had no accessibility features. And what we did is we rebuilt these into what we now call virtual labs.
Excellent.
The PhILS labs are a completely different simulation product that was built for human physiology. But again, PhILS labs are also labs that are assignable within Connect.
Yes, there's just a quick question about, can you show, I know you're in the lab, but again, when you're finished there, will you show how to preview them again by clicking on the eyeball? The question was, can you preview them online? And it's yes, no. So only through your Connect account online is how you can preview them.
Yep. So I'll show that momentarily here. So just to give an example though, what happens throughout these labs is when students are going through steps, we do have these questions pop up. So this question really gets students to think about the process that they're going through in this lab. So they're not just clicking and going through. It's, okay, we put the electrode on the stand, what is the role of that? Students will answer. It will make them get this question correct. So here, to hold the muscle, that was not right. And we'll go through here. So the electrodes are used for simulation. So let's make sure that the student knows, okay, what is the point of this and what is it going to be doing? I'll go on to phase 2. What this is going to do is now it's going to say, okay, you still have steps to complete. So it's going to let me know how far I've gotten in this process and the additional steps that I need to go through. So what I'll do is I'll back out here because I want to show you all how I got here in the first place. So we'll kind of back out and go back here to the beginning because I do think we had just a few people join late. So again, virtual labs is an assignment type that I found in Add Assignment. and then I go down to virtual labs. And then to preview any of these labs, you just click the little eyeball next to each lab here. So this is how you can preview it as an instructor, making sure that you know what the students are doing and making sure that this is actually what you want to assign to them. A majority of these labs, they do cover most of the AMP1, AMP2 course. Now, what you're not going to get is you're not going to get a lot of anatomy heavy labs in dissection. Virtual labs is more of our physiology product. It does cover some anatomy, but if you're looking for more like heart anatomy and dissections, that's where you'd use a different assignment type we have called Anatomy and Physiology Revealed. And that's covered in a different webinar. So if someone was looking for more anatomy type content, I would suggest you look into coming to our Anatomy and Physiology Revealed session. One other thing I'll show quick on the labs before assigning it is we do have some labs that are more skills-based and some labs that are more experiment-based. I was showing you one that was a bit more experiment-based. Here's an example of a skills-based lab. So this one's the skeletal muscle, and this is where it's going through, and you'll see here the flexion and extension at the elbow joint and the adduction and abduction. Just like the other lab I showed, the first time a student or you goes into this lab, it always shows an introduction. It gives a summary of what are you going to be doing and what do you need to know. We're in instructor mode, so here's that skip again. And in this particular lab, it will have us play the demonstrative movement, and then it will have us label our particular spots. And this lab goes through various, I guess you could say, views where students would be playing, watching the movement, and then labeling. When it gets to more of the blood type labs, you're doing a lot more experiment, working with blood. We do have other various labs. I'll just show you here quick. When it comes to electromyography, you have cardiovascular physiology, so more pulse rate, blood pressure, blood labs, digestion. So again, varying topics for what you would be looking for in AMP1, AMP2. The one lab that we don't have live right now, but we're targeting for sometime later this fall or in January, is our urinalysis lab. So that's one that you might be looking for that we do not have live yet. So once we've gone through the lab and we figure out what we want to assign, it's just as simple as clicking a box here. I do suggest when you're getting ready to assign a lab that you highlight and copy the name. So once we've selected our lab, we click continue, and then you can copy paste the name of that lab. We do have an enhancement coming later this fall that will actually carry over the name, but we don't have that live yet. So I do suggest once you choose a lab, just quickly copy and paste the name, so then you can enter it into the assignment name, and then you can call this whatever you'd want to. You set your due date, and then you set how many points you want this to be worth. And you can actually make it worth 0 points. Now, to be very clear on the grading for the students, you had seen that there were different phases in the lab. The lab auto-saves for the students after each phase, and as long as they complete all the phases by the due date, they're getting full credit for the points here. So when students are making mistakes, if they're doing something wrong, they're not being deducted points for that. They're not being deducted any points for resetting phases or having to go through a lab again. This is strictly if they can get through the lab and all the phases by the due date, they get however many points you are making it worth. But what I will do is I will show you momentarily how you can actually assess students for a grade on these labs. But what I'll do is I'll pause here, And if you have any questions, please enter them into the chat. And I know some questions have come in so far, so I'll kind of look and address some of those.
Yes, one question was, can it be linked to an LMS? So can it be linked in your Canvas? Absolutely.
Yep, absolutely. All of this integrates into the LMS, so that way students have a single sign-on from the LMS to complete these assignments, and then the grade also syncs back to the grade book.
And then we did have another question come through. Will we be adding more labs outside of this list that we currently have?
Yes, absolutely. So we're actually in the process of adding, I want to say 10 more labs that we have not listed yet in that list that I shared. Those are going to come in January, and then we're going to continue to develop this product to add even more labs. So as you look through this list, if you find something missing that you absolutely need, email myself or Valerie, and we'll make sure to add that to the list in our future development. And I'll put my email into the chat right now. And just so you all know, Valerie will be sending a follow-up email after our call today with some information. So you'll also have our information in that email. Again, some of the common questions we do get asked, just to reiterate, people will be asking for a heart dissection or kidney dissection. That comes within another one of our assignment types, which is our cadaver dissection tool, Anatomy and Physiology Revealed. And if anyone wanted to learn more about that product, in Valerie's email, I'm going to guess she will send the rest of the webinar series that we have.
For these meetings, we won't be sending a follow-up because we don't have registrations for these meetings. But I'm going to put my email in the chat, so if anybody wants the recording or any additional information, hang on to that and reach out anytime. Thank you. Sorry about that.
Valerie, I can show you the attendee list that you can post.
Oh, okay, excellent. Well, we can send that then if that.
Before we move on, does anyone else have any questions so far?
Yes, the question about the PhILS, but I think you're going to get to PhILS after virtual labs if they are without Flash.
Yep. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to move on to now how to assign a pre-lab or a post-lab assignment that ties to that simulation. So far what we've done is we've walked through assigning virtual labs, but now I'm going to show you a bank of questions that you can use to assign, again, to students either before they do this simulation or after they do the simulation. And these are available in the question bank. So how you would find this is we'd click on question bank, and then we have different banks of questions. If you click this drop down, there's various question banks, and I'm going to go to virtual labs question bank. So here it's going to give us all of our lab topics in alphabetical order. So for this example, I'll just choose the nervous system. I'm going to go to a different one here. I'm going to go to blood. So here in the blood bank of questions, we've got 101 total questions we can assign. I always want to remind people, use the filters whenever you come to this question bank. These filters, not only question type, but I'm going to point out here section. So here's how you can get to pre-lab blood questions. So here's various questions that you can assign to students. You could really use these as a pre-lab or a post-lab type question, but we've tagged these as pre-lab questions because this is what you'd want students to maybe know before launching into one of the simulations that you assign. This is where you can pick and choose individual questions. If you actually want to see what the question looks like, you can actually click on the question here. So you can use these assignments to create a pre-lab or a post-lab. On the pre-lab side, it's preparing students more. On the post-lab side, it's assessing, did they learn, did they retain what they would have done in the simulation. After we choose our questions, you add them to the assignment. We can name this assignment. We'll just call this blood pre-lab. After you've chosen your questions, it's just as simple as, do you want this homework, practice, quiz, or exam? There's different policy settings that you can edit based on the assignment. I'm not going to get into all these details because I want to focus more on virtual labs. But just know here that you can edit the policies. Don't forget to set a due date. And we will assign this to students. So what I did before I hopped on a call with all of you today is I did create an example of, I think in the circulatory system, blood. No, I did blood. Bear with me 1 second. Maybe it was in a different course. But what I've done is I've actually organized some of the assignment types here, where here in chapter 18, and this is particular to the book that I'm in Saladin, I've got the different blood typing, and then we could have had pre-labs, or we could have had post-labs before these virtual labs to assign to students. So that's just an example of when you think of virtual labs, think of a question bank that has pre-lab and post-lab questions, and then think of this simulation here that you can assign. And you can assign a simulation as many times as you want. So for example, if I wanted to assign the blood simulation, the blood virtual lab, a couple times, I can do that. I think we had a question come in. Do students see the pre-lab questions prior to beginning the lab? This would all be based off of how you set up the course. So for example, here, I'm gonna drag this down to blood. So we could set this up and organize it a couple different ways. So if you absolutely want students to see the pre-lab, you can put it first. So that way it shows up first in their assignment list. What you can also do is you can set a prerequisite. So if you want it where students cannot go into blood typing until they do the pre-lab, you can do that. And you do that by selecting both assignments, coming back up to the top, and setting a prerequisite. So what we're doing right here is we're saying students need 100% or whatever percent you want to require. Oh, actually, I'll need to drag these here. Yep, pre-lab. Okay. So here we're saying that students need to get 100% on the pre-lab before the blood typing lab would open for them. So if you wanted to basically gate assignments so a student could not start it until they performed on a pre-lab, you can do that. But again, this is all going to be up to whatever your preference is. The only thing a student absolutely sees before working on a lab is this introduction. So if you do not assign pre-lab questions, this is the only introduction pre-lab that your students would see if you did not assign those questions. And then just a follow-up question on the prerequisite assignment. Are students allowed multiple tries to get 100%? And again, if you wanted to give them multiple tries to get 100%, that's up to you in the policy settings. So that would be totally on the instructor's choice when you're using those questions in the question bank on the pre-lab or the post-lab. Okay, so I'm going to exit out of here. So moving on from virtual labs, one other lab assignment simulation that I'm going to show you is called PhILS. If you're teaching 2-semester A&P, I would highly suggest you first use virtual labs, and if you do not like the coverage of that virtual lab topic, then you would consider PhILS. So the way you find PhILS is in the question bank, and we're going to go to this drop down. So here's PhILS simulation links and question bank. Now again, PhILS was built for human physiology, so it's very physiology heavy. To find the PhILS simulations, now we go to this first option, PhILS lab simulations. Here's all of our lab topics. And to preview a lab, we would just click on the link. So here's our learning path in PhILS. And I'll just show you an example of what this simulation looks like. So here's an example, our directions, and what we'll be doing is we'll be going through our process here, doing this experiment. Really, to be honest, there's not a lot of overlapping topics between virtual labs and PhILS because one was virtual labs was built for 2-semester A&P, PhILS was built for human physiology. But again, it's totally up to you to decide what's the best topic that you want to cover for your students. A question came in, is PhILS Flash-based? And the answer is no. PhILS has been converted from Flash to HTML5, and actually now within our McGraw-Hill material, we do not have anything that's Flash-based. So for those of you not familiar with Flash and Flash code in browsers, all browsers are not allowing Flash websites as of the end of this year, which is why we've converted all of our content. And when we convert our content, the things that we really keep in mind, so when we build virtual labs, when we built PhILS, not only do we try and get it out of Flash, but the two main things we think about are accessibility, ADA compliance, and also how can it work on a mobile device. So both virtual labs and PhILS, both will work on a phone, both will work on a tablet, will work on a desktop. And then I'm going to go back in here. I actually want to go back into virtual labs because I did not point this out earlier. But we've also worked really hard on the accessibility of our product. So screen readers being able to pick up all the text on screen. I'll show you the example here for your students that have accessibility needs. Here's the keyboard shortcuts and navigation. So we could actually do this entire lab just using my keyboard. And I'm gonna skip through this because that's labeling. So I'm now using the tab button. I need to grab the microscope slide. So we're gonna tab over here, pick up a slide and put it down. I'm gonna pick up the pencil, and I'm doing all of this with my keyboard. So again, I wanna stress to you that you're gonna have students that might have different needs, and we do everything we can to address those accessibility needs. Even down to if you have a colorblind student, so I turned on black and white on my screen, making sure that we have the proper contrast of colors, even if you have a student that is severely colorblind, being able to see what's happening on screen. So I'm going to exit back out of here. What other questions do you all have?
Is there an instructional video for ADA student access? Maybe that you could show the instructor resources with the guides.
Yep, so I'll show two things here. When it comes to using virtual labs, I did forget to also point out that we have a virtual labs tutorial. We highly suggest you assign this to students because this teaches them on how to use all the different features in this assignment type, virtual labs. So that's the one thing I'd point out is lean on this tutorial here and have this tutorial teach students how to use virtual labs so you're not spending time on how to teach them to use the tool. So that's the first thing that I would point out. And then in the instructor resources for all of our sites, you will find virtual labs resources. So here we have user guides, implementation guides. You had seen the pop-up questions that came up when I was going through. It gives the instructor resource guide to those pop-up questions. And also we have pre-lab PDFs. So I'd showed you those pre-lab questions that you could assign. You could actually download these PDFs and you could email these PDFs to students as well as more of a pre-lab type of assignment. So just know an instructor resource guide, how-to and implementation guide, even showing all the learning objectives, but then that tutorial that I had showed as well. All right. Any other questions? And I'm happy to take any specific questions any of you have about your course. That's a majority of what I really wanted to cover today. So if there's a specific lab that you want me to show, if there's anything that you want me to walk through again, I'm more than willing to do any of that at this time. There was a question, how do we get to the instructor resources? So right now, I'm just on the Instructor Connect homepage. I clicked on Library, and then I clicked on Instructor Resources. And then I was able to find it here in Virtual Labs Resources. If anyone does not have instructor resources showing up here when they go to their course, you can contact your sales rep or let us know and we can get that activated for you. There are times when instructor resources does not show up, and that's more on a quality control, making sure that students don't somehow get access to this content.
There was one question that came directly to me. When you talked about PhILS, when will they be available? They're actually available now. And they're all rebuilt as of, I think July 15th or so, they all went live into the new HTML5.
Yep. And there's actually another question that came in. Is it possible to see the student results? And I forgot to show the performance. So if you want to see how your students are performing, and I'm actually going to skip over to a different course that has student data. So if I want to see how students are performing on my virtual labs, I can go here to performance, and we want to go to assignment results. This is where you can choose the different assignments. I'm just going to run results for everything, and then I'll show you the virtual labs. So here's one that students worked on already, how enzymes function, the effective temperature. I can see which students successfully completed, which students never started, and which students completed maybe a few of the phases. For this instance, I'll go and I'll just show a student that completed it. all you do, you click on their score, and it's going to launch you into the student's attempt of the virtual lab. So this is really everything that the student sees once they finish a lab. We're now in the instructor view. We can see if the students had to reset any phases, if there's an area where they struggled. Here, we talked about those pop-up questions. We can see if any students really struggled on particular pop-up questions. Some labs, and I did not show one of the labs that had this, some labs have students choose a hypothesis and a strategy to be able to then review that at the end of the lab. You can see the data the students collected, and then we can use our menu navigation down here to actually go back and see what the students had done. So I'm looking at a graph the student actually created. I'm looking at the attempt here that the student actually worked on, and the data that they collected. So I'll show this again, because I want to make sure everyone saw this. So again, how do you see student results? We can go to performance, and then assignment statistics. And you can run it for all your assignments, or you can just run it for a few of them. If I wanted to, again, just see how enzymes work. I think I assigned this multiple times. Let's see if it's this one. Yeah, here we go. And here we can see the student performance. One other thing I'll point out quick is when it comes to some of these labs, you can also click on the lab if you need to ever manage extensions. So if you're coming up to a due date and you want to be able to extend this assignment for all students or just one or a few students, you are able to do this. Very, very important is you have to extend the due date before the original due date expires. So for example, if I had a due date of today at noon and I wanted to extend that assignment, and right now it's 2:39 Central Time, I would not be able to add extensions. But if this assignment was due at 3 o'clock today and it's due at 2:39, what I can do is I can click on the assignment, I can manage the extensions, and then you can do it for the entire class, or if you just have maybe 3 students that need an extension, you can do it just for those 3 students. So just know, really on the policy sides, extension side, there's a lot of flexibility. And ultimately, you're going to come up with questions throughout this fall. And that's what you have our contact information for, where if anything does come up, if you need a refresher on anything, please reach out to myself, reach out to Valerie, and we're more than happy to answer your questions. So I think at this time, that's everything I have to show today. So again, happy to answer any questions any of you have. If there's a specific lab that you want to see, specific question that you have, more than happy to show you that all right now. But if no one has questions, then I think we might be done for the day. All right, well, Valerie and I will still stay on for a few more minutes. If anyone wants to stay on and ask a question just one-on-one. If not, thank you everyone for joining. Contact us if you have questions, and have a great semester.
Could you show again, PhILS, the new assignment path map?
Oh yeah, absolutely. All right, so PhILS here. We're on the instructor homepage. I can click on Add Assignment and Question Bank. And this is where we utilize this drop-down menu again. So from the drop-down, we're going to find the PhILS, simulations, and links. And then there's going to be different question banks here. There's a pre-lab and a post-lab question bank for every lab. But if you actually just want to see the simulations, so you want to assign the simulations to student, it's going to be this top one here. So we'll click Select, and here's the 42 different labs that we have. You can click on any of these. You can either assign it in this assignment. If you want to preview the lab, you can preview the lab by clicking the link. So again, using our drop-down menu here, clicking the PhILS simulations, and our first option is going to be, how do you even get to the simulation? How do you assign that simulation? And here's our entire list. Just to be clear though, for those of you that are still on, any work a student does in PhILS, none of this is feeding back to a gradebook. So the only way you're really assessing students on their performance of PhILS is if you have them print out or email you their lab report, or if you're using the pre and post lab questions that we have here. So that's the only thing that's going to be auto graded. Did that cover the question, Valerie?
I believe so. Lawrence, I think, did that help answer the question? Where you find them?
Let's see. I know I unmute here.
Yeah, you're unmuted. Oops.
Yeah, I think so. Will that change in the future? Will they be able to be linked in terms of assessment? And secondly, I kind of missed where the drop-down menu was. I couldn't see where your cursor was.
Okay, yeah, I'll go back here from the beginning. So add assignment and question bank. And then when you come down here, you just click this little caret button. So hopefully you can see that now. I'll zoom out, just make sure.
Okay, so that window shows up when you click the assignment type.
Yep.
Okay, all right, thanks.
Yep, no problem.
I don't know why I'm unmuted over in the participant area. There's a line. So I thought I was muted. All right, thank you very much. Appreciate your help.
Thank you for joining. Does anyone else have any questions? And if you have a question and you're not sure how to get off mute, you can enter that into the chat, and I think Valerie might be able to unmute you.
Yeah, my problem was I'm kind of used to Zoom, and this is slightly different in terms of those controls. So
Yes, if you hover over the main screen, it's on that bottom left. It's that dot on the bottom left.
All right.
Great. Well, thank you, everyone. Best wishes for a really great fall semester. Thanks, Matt.
Yep. Thanks, everyone.